And we're live, I think. We're getting some people in. Hi, guys. Welcome. I'm Maddie. Nancy, do you want to say hi?
Hi, everyone.
Let's just wait for a couple of minutes so everyone is in. Oh, the numbers are getting high.
No pressure at all.
No pressure at all, Nancy. Yeah. I was telling my awful dream about how I accidentally ended up the whole webinar to all of you. So I'll be very careful with like all the clicks now. Okay, just one more minute. Whew. It's so weird not to see the faces, right?
I know. I think it would be good if people kind of in the chat group, in the chat, just said hi and where they're joining from. That would be really cool.
Yeah, I'll remind that. Oh, they're saying hi. Hi, guys. Oh, so nice. Can you see it? Oh, hello.
This is probably what it feels like to be Beyonce on a stage.
Oh, it's so nice of you guys. Yeah, please use the chat box to introduce yourself, to speak to each other, to send us some emojis, send us some love. Oh, it's going really quickly. Okay, so let me just see. Okay, so the number is stable now. So we will start. So guys, very welcome to our Perbox Live, first Perbox Live session, where we decided to open this up to the entire community. So welcome, friends and family. I can't see you, but I know you're there. I can feel you. We do this type of sessions every month, and this time we have decided to join the forces because we have to start getting comfortable when we talk about uncomfortable things. So yeah, as I said before, please use the chat box, just to wave to each other. Oh, Rob Barry, hi Rob. You see at the bottom, you can see the Q&A box where you can submit your questions, because at the end of the talk, we will have at least 15 minutes to go through them as well. So as you already know, guys, the Black Lives Matter movement started in 2013 when George Zimmerman was found not guilty for shooting a 17-year-old boy. And to be fair, the movement kind of faded until today, until 2020, when we are experiencing this racial awakening. And as human beings, we attempted to have this very short attention span. And I really hope that this is not the case today. This is why we're here today. This is why we have to keep sharing our experiences and educating ourselves, because it's important. So a month ago, I was on my LinkedIn, and I bumped into this very interesting post. Nancy, can you hear me? Nancy? Oh no. Nancy is gone. What do I do now? 1 second. Let me just stop sharing this, guys. Sorry, guys, about that. We lost Nancy. I hope she will just rejoin this now. Oh, here we go. She's back. Yay! Let's clap. She's back. I got so scared.
I ran away.
Yeah. Oh, whew. I told you about my dream today. Okay, so back to the topic. So yeah, so a month ago, I bumped into this LinkedIn post, and my first reaction was, oh my God, I want to be friends with this woman. So Nancy, can I just share the video that I show? And this is actually why you're here today, because then we became friends.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So let me just click. I watched this video, I'm not gonna lie to you, a couple of times. And So Nancy, please welcome. Your bio says that you are, you've got your own business, you've got your own podcast, you are startup strategist, you are a business agility coach, and it seems that no matter what you do an awesome job. So welcome, and please, we've got about 300 people who would like to listen to your story.
Awesome. So it's not every day 300 people like to listen to your story. I guess this is what it feels like to be Beyonce. I don't know why I said that, just a bit of banter, I guess. So cool. First of all, thank you all very much for showing up and for being ready to listen to my story. And before I crack on and share my story, my ask from you all is to use your imagination and to picture the scenarios I'm about to share with you. This is not something I ever thought I imagined having to do. But then again, 2020 is the year of turning the unimaginable into reality. Hashtag entanglement. And if you don't know what that is, then I guess I'm giving away my age at this point, but no problem with that. So I guess before we look at the present, it's really important for me that we look at the past. So let my words take you back in time. And we're going to talk about the past. And in particular, we're going to talk about when I discovered something that would change my life for good. It was when I discovered that.
Sorry, I just need to.
So it's 1999, and this little girl is sitting on a bench in her school playground. She's very nervous, sweaty palms, and she's trying to suss out the environment by assessing which group to play with. As you can imagine, it's a very scary place to be in. She finds a group of girls who are having the time of her life, and she says to herself, that is a group I would love to join. She taps on one of the shoulders and says, in Dutch, mag ik met jullie spelen? For those of us who don't speak Dutch, basically what it means is, can I play with you? The little girl is met with rejection, what feels like a cold shower, but not one of those really nice ones on a hot summer day, more like the one that you would get if you were in Siberia. The little girl is told, no, we do not play with Black kids. If you haven't guessed, yes, I am that little girl. See, what makes that moment so iconic in my memories is that it marks the moment that I learned that I was Black. Up until that point, I was just Nancy, the oldest sibling. I spoke French. My family is from Belgium, Nigeria, and the Netherlands. As you can imagine, that is one eventful dinner party. Wednesday was my favorite day and still is. And I loved playing with my imaginary friends. I think that's where my agile coaching and controlling for stuff came from. And then we go into early 2000s.
Sorry, Nancy, can I just stop you? I just need to stop sharing because I can't make it a full screen. So I'm just going to reshare one more time. Sorry about that.
No worries at all. This is part of doing things live and on Zoom. So
yeah, I really need to do this now. 1 second. It's still not full screen, right? Okay, just one more time, I'm sorry. I need to just reboot the presentation, that's what it is.
No worries at all.
They're like guys texting me and I'm like, ah! Sorry guys, I'm so sorry. Okay, here we go. And now we'll do the present. And it's full screen, ladies and gentlemen.
Whoa, look at that.
Yay! I love that. Cool, sorry, yeah.
So can we go to the slide with 2000 on it?
Yeah.
Cool, awesome. Nice, so, hey, I guess that's part of life, right? A glitch and then you try and carry on like no one is watching. So then in early 2000s, something happened to me that honestly, no child should ever witness. At this point in time, I'm about roughly 10 years old. And like some kids, I experienced severe bullying. Now, so when you grow up with a Nigerian parent or parents, they teach you to stand up for yourself and that no one has the right to bring you down. So I decided to take a page out of my parents' book, and I decided to stand up for myself. So I did. I pushed my bully back and I said, "Stop." Now, over lunch, the bully went home, and I assumed that they spoke to their parents about what happened. Later, after my physical education class, PE, I went to the changing room to get out my gym kit and to change. And then I heard a loud bang, and I assumed it was something else, but a few moments later, a dark shadow towers over me, and as I turn around, it's the mother of my bully, and what I hear next shook me to the core. "If your black hands ever touch my child again, you'll see." My body afterwards went into a state of shock as my cheeks warmed up and the waves of tears were about to flood through. But there was no one around me to console me, so I had to dry my eyes and carried on, and I never looked back. Now, I didn't look back because I lived in an environment in the Netherlands where I literally was the only Black child. And the reason why I bring up that scenario is because when I look back at what it's like to be a woman of color in the tech and startup space, whether it's a meetup or a team meeting or I join an organization, quite often I'm the only Black person. So let's go to 2011. Now, in 2011, I decided to move to the United Kingdom. Thankfully, because of Brexit, I made a good choice of moving a lot sooner. It's my 21st birthday, and I decided to do something different. I booked a table at a pretty exclusive club in London. But when my friends and I showed up, the bouncer smirked, and in a very subtle way, a bit underneath the rug said, "We don't accept your kind here." Yep, this is the United Kingdom in London, a very affluent and pretty progressive city. That was what we experienced. We decided to throw in the towel and call it a night. So I'm going to end my storytelling here. And what we're going to do now is look at how all of these translates into what my experience is like in the tech and startup space. So when I look back at what it's like to be a woman of color in the tech and startup space, I'm reminded of my past. See, what I learned from all of those experiences is that racism is very random, subtle, and it's hidden, but more importantly, it's part of the culture. So when we try to address racism in the workplace, we need to look at the culture. See, the thing is about culture is that it dictates what racism in your business will look like. To give you a better idea, here are a couple of examples of scenarios that I've witnessed in this tech and startup space. I used to work for a founder and CEO who created a culture of command and control, also known as fear. And what had happened was during a company all hand, a question was asked about when we would start hiring for diversity in the leadership team, upon which the response was, "We don't need to hire people of color."
Wow.
Now, as you can imagine, in a culture of command and control where fear takes over, that question did not see daylight anymore. Now, what happens when there's little representation in the leadership team? Well, the impact is people who do not look like the leadership team or do not share a similar background to people in the leadership team start to ask themselves the question, can I really make it? Now, obviously, as you would know, that means lots of businesses where amazing, talented people who could do some awesome stuff are questioning, can I make it, ultimately leave. Now, the next part is, and yes, this might ruffle some feathers for some people, the banter culture. Now, this actually exists in a lot of tech startups. And while in some aspects it's great, and in some aspects it is light-hearted humor and fun, it can easily and quickly excuse bad behavior. For example, I used to work for a tech startup where out of nowhere. As you can see, I don't know if people can see me on the screen, but my hair is kinky, it's wild, it's lovely.
Awesome.
um, there was a moment where an ex-colleague of mine decided to grab my hair out of nowhere, upon which he responded with, "It's super cool." Now, the impact, what happened was I responded with, "Please don't touch my hair anymore, it is inappropriate." Now, my experience was dismissed because I was told it's just a bit of banter. Now, see what happens when we apply banter to every situation is that we create this environment and this culture where people feel like they can't speak up when certain things are happening to them. So then the next thing that is worth sharing is your company policies. Would you believe it that I actually used to work for a company where in the contract it stated that we couldn't have urban hairstyles? Now, if you get the chance after this webinar to go onto Google, I want you to type in professional and unprofessional search questions on Google. What you will end up finding when you Google professional looks is a lot of European Caucasian features. And when you type in unprofessional, it is the kinks that I wear today and the dreadlocks that you might see in a Bob Marley. So when I take all of that experience and I go into George Floyd, which is our next slide. Now, see, when the Black Lives Matter movement started in 2013, I was ready to be part of the change. With the situation around George Floyd, however, I personally felt really different. I was emotionally and mentally exhausted and drained. I couldn't engage or provide answers to big philosophical questions asked by people in the workplace, such as, "Nancy, how do we end racism?" So while the world was waking up to the notion of racism, I was busy fighting off past traumatic experiences around racism. And that was quite a lonely place to be in, especially when you are one of the few Black people in your team, in your organization. Now, to keep my mental health intact, I decided to step back and create TikTok videos, which is why we are here today. So I might add that as a little.
That's how I found you.
Yeah. However, while creating content on social media, I noticed a trend amongst businesses and brands in the tech space and beyond. They were all copying each other, and which to me looked like a sea of empty promises. None of these tech brands followed their posts with tangible and smart actions, and I think that's where the problem lies. L'Oreal, if we go to the next slide, actually the next slide, yes. L'Oreal on the 1st of June made a post, like so many other companies, about the support with Black Lives Matter. Now, this was followed by a sea of backlashes because a wonderful Black woman, Monroe Bergdorf, shared her experience, her personal experience with the makeup brand. See, her experience introduced a cloud of doubt about the intentions of L'Oreal when it comes to fighting racism. So what could they have done differently? I think a couple of things. One is they could have released a statement plus a smart action to show that they were actually committed to change, and in particular to change in the workplace. Because I think what happens is that a lot of these posts simply are statements. And what we are asking for now is, and when I say we, I'm not talking about every single Black person, because we're not, the world doesn't work in that way. But I think where the trend and what the desire is that people want to see tangible change. And I don't think, and this brings me to my second point, I don't think people are looking for businesses to transform the world. I think what people are actually asking for is for businesses to be accountable for the culture that exists within their workplace. Ultimately, a single post will not transform your culture. And I think that's where L'Oreal got it wrong. So I guess where it all comes down to is that because every culture and business is slightly different, we need to stop applying a one-size-fits-all solution when we come to trying to solve racism. Now, the task of changing your culture is not an easy one. If we go to the next slide. See, culture exists in the deep trenches of our underlying beliefs and assumptions. So in order for us to really have an impact, we need to focus less on copying what other brands are doing and more about understanding and spending time in figuring out our own culture and to identify if and where racism exists. And I make the if statement because if you follow these steps and you realize that you have a big other cultural problem, please do go and pay attention in solving that. Essentially, we need to get our grovels ready, roll up our sleeves, and we need to dig in deep. We need to dig in the places where those underlying beliefs and assumptions that we hold about each other live. So therefore, when you look at combating racism within your organization, if that is something that you have identified as a problem, my recommendation is that you look at it objectively at the culture and the context of racism, and more importantly, diagnose it, target the critical area, and do this within your organization and your team. See, here's a really funny thing. If you were to go to a doctor and I was to go to a doctor, they wouldn't prescribe the same solution. They would look at you objectively and look at me objectively. They would diagnose our unique situations and prescribe a set of approaches to our specific situation. So I guess at this point in time, you're probably wondering, this is all so great. How do I get started? How do I get started with diagnosing? So these are the 4 steps I have advised tech businesses and startups who've approached me about, Nancy, where do we even begin? Step 1 is to ask yourself the question, are you ready? And some of you might say, but obviously I'm ready. Let's get started. I would say, no, really sit down and sit in that space of asking yourself, are you ready? Look at your policies, are they ready? Review your existing priorities. Talk to your people. And the last point might sound really silly, but is it important to you? See, what happens if we don't ask ourselves if we're ready is that we find ourselves in a situation like L'Oreal, where like a loose cannon, we shoot initiatives left, right, and center. And quite often, even with the best of intentions, if we aren't ready to do something, we actually end up doing more damage than good. So once you've said, yes, I'm ready, we can now go to the next step, which is people data. Collaborate with your people HR department and start tracking data. Most businesses, when it comes to diversity stats, they only track gender. See, the idea is that you want data to help you paint a picture of the things that you find difficult to see with your blind spots and just your plain eye. And then when you track that data, I want you to look at it across all races and then primarily pay attention to retention levels, pay, and promotion. So at this point in time, once you said, I'm ready, and either you are looking at the data or you start tracking the data, you can now go into the other point, which is the 3rd step, is your teams. Start a dialogue with your team. And I think it's really important before anyone leaves this place and starts sending Slack messages and saying, I want to talk about racism right now. Pause right there, because these are 3 things I really want you to make a note of. Ask if people want to opt in, because not everyone wants to have these conversations. Primarily, some people of color may not want to have this conversation, and some people of color may have a completely different opinion than you think. So ask if people want to opt in. And if people say, yes, I want to opt in, do something cool like a Zoom coffee conversation roulette. And then another last thing is get managers to check in on their people. See, ironically, when all of this was happening with George Floyd, I had reached out to people of color across different businesses that I've crossed paths with in the past. And while these people don't know each other, they all said the same thing, which was really alien for me. They were all having mentally a really hard time, but no one manager approached to say, hey, how are you doing? So what we have here are businesses doing big campaigns, donating tons of money, and which on a money issue, that's another topic for another day. But what they really forgot was just to simply check in on their people. At the flip side, I had a lot of Caucasian colleagues and just people I've crossed paths with who were feeling overwhelmed by all of the information that they were getting through social media, through TV, and all of that while cooped up in their house during quarantine. And those people also said, I've actually not had my manager to check in if I'm okay. So I guess what I'm highlighting at this step with step 3 about your team is to check in on your people. Then if we look at the last step, which is the 4th step, and this is the one thing that you can do by yourself, even after this call, is to diversify your feed. See, we all live in this echo chamber where we're surrounded by people who look like us, sound like us, share the same opinions as us. They probably go to bed at the same time as we do. And I think the challenge there is that we end up all sharing the same blind spots. So my question for you is, break your echo chambers. It's not really a question, it's more a suggestion. Break your echo chambers, expand your social circle. And you can simply do that while living within social distancing by just simply hitting the follow button of someone who looks different to you and sounds different to you and has a different opinion to you, either on LinkedIn, Instagram, or Twitter. Now, I think these are 4 pretty tangible things that you can go and apply straight away. And that brings me then to my concluding point, which is this is a journey for everyone, and it's going to require teamwork across all levels of the business. And I think we're stepping in the right direction by simply shining a light on the topic. However, we need to be mindful that we are less like an AK-47 shooting initiatives left, right, and center, and more like a sniper that focuses specifically on a problem that has been diagnosed and specifically identifies a set of approaches and solutions for that problem. Because it's only when we do that that we can really ensure tangible progress and change. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Nancy.
Yeah.
We're going to go through some questions, but I'm experiencing this technical nightmare because I cannot open the Q&A box for some reason. So guys, if you have any questions for Nancy, I can see there are 12 questions, but I cannot open them. So can you just send those questions in the chat box? But before that, Nancy, I've got some questions for you. So how do you view moments like this? Do you think is an opportunity to create more awareness, or like, how do you feel about that? And how does the whole movement actually make you feel? You mentioned a little bit about it before.
Yeah, so
to expand that.
So when everything went down, and I guess when the enlightenment across the world happened, for me, it was really about, at that point in time, trying to process a lot of experiences and memories that I, quite frankly, had brushed underneath the carpet in order to move on. But at the same time, I started to have conversations with people who, prior to it, completely thought that racism was a problem of the 50s.
Yeah.
And I think where the friction for me happened was where overnight I became the Wikipedia of racism for every single person in my life who was Caucasian. Yeah. And that was an extremely exhausting place to be in. And hence why the retrieving, and hence why the stepping back, and hence why the TikTok video.
Yeah.
I do think moments like this is important. I don't think racism looks the same as what it was in the 50s and in the 60s and just back in the past. It's morphed, it's evolved, it's slightly different. Yeah. But I think just like anything else in life, it's extremely important to talk about the uncomfortableness.
Exactly.
And
That's why we're here today.
exactly. And if essentially, if your culture is going to be better because you're speaking about it,
Yeah.
I think it's also really key for businesses and teams to know what a better culture actually is. They need
Yeah.
to define that for themselves because it's not the same.
Yeah.
But if you use that as your benchmark and talking about this subject means that you're moving the needle in that direction, then talk about it.
Yeah. And also I was reading Ben Horowitz's book, What You Do Is Who You Are. And actually it lines very nicely here that, you know, your company's culture, who you are is not what you say, it's what you do. So it's very important for companies to take some action and actually do something about it, because what you do defines who you are and what, like, yeah. So another question is that, you know, what would you say to companies who didn't do anything because they were too scared for not getting it right?
So first of all, I would say it is very normal for being scared. It's very normal. So we all suffer from like option paralysis, where there's so many things I could do, and because I don't know what to do, I freeze.
Yeah.
And I would say for companies in that space, or teams or individuals who didn't post, please do not feel like you are guilty of anything, because you're all human.
Absolutely.
However, I would say with them within that same breath of space is that once you are in a place where you are ready to have those conversations, follow those 4 steps that I said around check if you're ready by just checking with your people, and then start capturing data, and maybe spend some time just capturing data and analyzing it, and then speaking around that data, because that's really what's going to drive more better and fruitful conversations. So that's what I would say. I would say don't rush it. Don't be a L'Oreal. If that,
Yeah,
just
exactly.
use that as your reference. Right now, am I acting like L'Oreal? And if it's yes, then probably step back.
So it's not about ticking the box, it's about
No.
actually doing what, if you, first of all, as you said before, it's about, do you actually care about it? And if you care about it, then do something about it. It's
Yeah.
not about ticking the box.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And what would you say to companies who think it's too late to address an issue? Because it's been quite some time now since the,
Yeah, but racism has been here for quite some time, and we're only dealing
yeah,
with it
that's
now.
true.
So I guess there's no such thing as perfect timing.
It's never late.
There's just you and your actions, and every day you get an opportunity to do something better and different than yesterday. So I would say for those companies who feel like it's too late, I would say get out of your head, because it's not too late, and find little tiny actions that you can do within you. I think the main thing is that it might be too late to post something externally, but to be honest, most of the value doesn't actually come from posting things internally. Most of the value comes from internal work and hard work, and that means talking to people, changing policies, having hard conversations, tracking data. All of the good stuff sits there, and there's never a perfect timing to address those stuff.
Yeah. So now I'm just gonna start reading some questions from the audience. Okay,
Cool.
thank you so much. We've got a couple. So what are your thoughts on what can be done beyond END objectives? Can workplaces help staff educate themselves on the bigger picture of institutional races, whiteness, and stuff like
You guys came with the hard questions today.
that?
I know what I'm drinking after this. Right. So I think ultimately what it is that this is a very complex challenge. And the reason why I'm pointing towards data is that I find that data creates a neutral ground for healthy conversations.
Yeah.
So when it comes to whiteness or institutional racism, I would say, where can you bring in data so that you have more constructive conversations about the subject? And use that to be a driving force to what should we educate people on. So, for example, there's a company that I know of, and what they did was that they realized a lot of the people in their business and these were primarily people from a from a different ethnic background that wasn't European. They all didn't feel too confident bringing up their full name into work. Because it gets to a moment where you're tired of people saying, how do I pronounce your name? And it's you just get tired, so you don't even bother introducing your last name. And I don't know if you look back at slavery, one of the things that they stripped slaves away from was their name. So your name means a lot. And if people in your business can actually try and pronounce your name, that means that you're creating this culture where people are fully accepted. So the reason why I bring this up with regards to like white supremacy and all of that jazz is this company had identified that in their business, people didn't come to work with their full name because there was a bit of a shame around it. So the way how they addressed it was by running a campaign called Say My Name. And they said to all of their employees, hey, if you feel like you want to bring your name, like your ethnic name to work, let us know and we'll change your email address, your Slack name, we'll do all of that. Just let us know what the names are. So I hope that gives someone the idea around like what they can do to address and to better educate. I would say identify where the education gaps are and use data to help you identify where those education gaps are, and then take it from that point.
And what can businesses do to attract more diverse candidates to join the business?
So I'm a big fan of blind hiring in general, because I think sometimes when we focus on hiring for a certain characteristic is that we end up dismissing diversity of thought and we end up focusing on just a tick box exercise. But then funny enough, everyone who's in the company seems to go to the same university or came from the same university, same socio-economical background. They go to the same holidays. They're just very much clones of each other. So I would say, again, this comes back to your data, and this is especially for startups, tech startups that are just starting. It's really important for you to start capturing data around some key operations. So where do most of your candidates come from? And if they all come from the same university, purposely go look into a different pool. And that could be a different country, a different university, or perhaps scrape university as a complete requirement and just hire people based on their merit and what they can do. I think so basically what I'm saying is the same thing that I said at step 4 around diversifying your echo chambers is businesses need to start diversifying and breaking those echo chambers where they usually go to hire. And I'm quite confident that if you take that approach, you'll definitely start hiring a diverse set of people.
Cool. So there are a lot of questions about resources, and do you have, Nancy, any recommendations that we can follow on Twitter or Instagram? But we have a surprise for you guys. Me and Nancy,
We'll get there.
Yeah, hold on. Yeah, because me and Nancy, we created a list of resources that we can educate ourselves and have a little bit stronger arguments about race and diversity. So I will be sharing that with you guys. You probably will get an email from us with the video from the talk and the list of resources. Great. So yeah, let me just get a couple of more questions. How can you create an environment for the companies that supports diversity?
That's a bit of an odd question. How do you create? I don't think people go in and say, I want to create, like, you create an environment irrespective of whether or not you're aware of it.
Yeah.
I think the question really is just more around, is the environment I'm creating positively contributing or negatively contributing? And it comes back to the data point. So as you may have noticed, I say data a lot because genuinely it's the best way to have conversations about complex stuff.
Yeah.
I think I would flip that question and be not like, how do I create an environment? It's more like, is the environment I'm creating today positive or negative?
Yeah.
And if you're unable to, and if you want to find out where the pendulum swings, is by looking at the data. And
Yeah.
if you don't have data, start tracking it. I'm a big fan of, so for those who don't know, I'm an agile coach as a background. So retrospectives, which comes with the agile way of working, is something that I absolutely adore. And I feel like people should bring it into their own personal life, because it's a bit like therapy sometimes. Is I'm a big fan of a framework called the current reality tree. And essentially it's a retrospective that allows for healthy conflicts and conversations to take place. And the structure, essentially how the framework is set up, it's there to help you drill down to root causes. And I think it's a really interesting way of generating data in a more human way than perhaps if you were to simply look at your HR systems, where most of these kind of diversity stats would live. So I hope that kind of answers your question for who is asking.
Yeah, that's great. Cool. So yeah, so as I mentioned, we will be sharing the resources. And guys, if you have any more questions to Nancy, you can follow her on Instagram, not Instagram, LinkedIn. If you have any questions or feedback to me, apart from technology part, because I've been just stressing here. Everything just didn't work today. I'm so sorry, guys. It was not easy. So yeah, thank you so much, guys. And we will finish a little bit early today, but we will be having another webinar with Will from Spill, and who's going to be talking about what happened to our happiness. It's going to happen on the 13th of August, so please watch out for an email to register. And I'm so sad it's over now, Nancy. We have to say goodbye now.
It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. And thank you all so much for being super embracive.
And thank you so much. Look at that. Can you see the chat box? It's just going like crazy.
I know.
Yeah.
Is this what it feels like to go viral?
Yeah, guys, I really appreciate it. We had a lot of people joining us today, and it means a lot. It means a lot that a lot of people care and a lot of people want to learn and share their own experiences and their own practices. So it's amazing, amazing stuff. Thank you, Nancy. So I will end up this meeting now. So yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye, guys. Thank you for everything.